Joining me now is political journalist John Fund. John, thanks so much for joining me tonight on the U.S. Report. An interesting comment from Joe Biden this week. He said he may have skipped mounting a 2024 re-election bid if he were not facing Donald Trump. Now, that's quite ironic given Trump's performance in the polls at the moment, don't you think?
Well, let's face it, every Democrat in Washington with any kind of political sense knows that Joe Biden is the one Democrat Donald Trump could certainly beat. And all of the polls indicate that. Joe Biden is in a very curious position with that comment because he says that, of course, he's accomplished so much. Bidenomics, which, of course, has bombed in the polls. Foreign policy successes, I don't know what they are, but he claims that they exist. So you'd think that a president would be running on his record. Instead, Biden, remember, in 2020, James, he told us, I'm going to be a transition figure. I'm old enough that I recognize I may well serve only one term, and I'm a transition to the next generation. Well, apparently he loves the White House so much, or perhaps Dr. Jill, the First Lady, loves the White House so much, he's decided to run again. But instead of running on his record, he's running because Donald Trump is my opponent, and I have to save democracy from Donald Trump. The real sadness of our election, if it's going to be a race of Trump versus Biden 2.0, is that it sounds like it's a political grudge match. Donald Trump is running for revenge, and Joe Biden is running because he somehow has convinced himself he's the only man who can save America from Donald Trump.
Well, and that's the whole thing there. I mean, when now it turns into this grudge match, because that's exactly the phrase I was thinking about when you were walking us through all of this here. In a country where you have low voter turnout or compulsory voting like you do in Australia, how does this inspire anybody except for the true haters on one side or the other to come out and vote on Election Day? We're in for a very negative campaign, wouldn't you say?
Oh, that's guaranteed. The consequences of that negative campaign may be twofold. One, an explosion of interest in third-party candidates, whether it be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Cornel West, who's running as an independent, or Jill Stein, who's running as the Green Party candidate, and a much lower voter turnout. You know, I ran into a focus group the other day that I sat in on, and there was a woman there who was very wise. She said, you know, I fear that my choice next year is not going to be the lesser of two evils, but the evil of two lessers.
That's an interesting way to put it. But, you know, the thing is, too, John, you know, with these focus groups and being around politics, the thing that ultimately determines how elections go very often is simply the economy. And the public does not buy Bidenomics, as you suggested. More than 4 in 10 say they are seriously concerned about rising costs. Have a listen to this little exchange on CNN that happened the other day.
So on issue number one of the economy, it's a pretty poor outlook from the American people. Only 29% assess current economic conditions as good. 71% say they are poor. And his approval rating, the president's approval rating on the economy data, is even worse than his overall approval rating. It's only at 33%, 67% disapprove.
Now, we talk about history sometimes on this show, John, and I'm very much put in mind of the 1980 Ronald Reagan campaign when he asked, are you better off than you were 4 years ago when Jimmy Carter was president? And at the same time, also, Iran was acting up. The Middle East was a mess. Energy prices were soaring. There was a lot of deja vu here. Do these numbers almost guarantee a Trump win, or does Trump's, other foibles wind up causing him other troubles?
To be determined. The Republican nomination has Trump as, of course, the clear front runner, but it's not a done deal because I believe the Democrats are looking for a way to swap Joe Biden out of the race, making him an offer he can't refuse, perhaps. Maybe even suggesting that, maybe there is something to this Hunter Biden thing after all. You never know. If Trump continues to lead Biden in the polls, the Democrats may go that route. But you're absolutely right about the economy, James. There's a new poll out from Civics which says the American people recognize that inflation has fallen, but they also recognize that the basic basket of goods, food, fuel, housing, all the things that they consume, is up 22% under Biden. And very few Americans have gotten a 22% raise in the last 3 years. What the voters tell this pollster is, we do not believe the war on inflation will be licked until prices fall below where they were before the inflation started. That creates an enormous barrier to Joe Biden. That's a steeplechase that he may not be able to overcome, even if he has a second term. So Biden may think he's conquered inflation, but right now, inflation is conquering his political chances.
Yeah, and Joe Biden and Dr. Jill, as you say, they're not going to the grocery store every week and trying to put together a basket of goods to feed a family, or filling up the presidential limo and seeing, how much that's costing, while ordinary Americans do. How much of this then really comes down to a fight over what feels like, to me, an awful lot of people feeling like the American compact is broken, the middle class compact is broken, that, if you work hard and you do the right thing, you can have a comfortable middle class lifestyle with some degree of affluence. That seems to be harder and more out of reach for an awful lot of people. And Biden, he gets the blame for a lot of this, doesn't he?
Well, the incumbent in charge gets credit for things that he had nothing to do with. He also gets blames for things that he didn't have much to do with. You're absolutely right, James. About 20% of Americans believe that their children and grandchildren will lead as good a life or a better life than they did. That's an incredibly pessimistic number for people. Now, there are a lot of complications for that, but the bottom line is real incomes were going up under Trump, despite all of the chaos and the noise and all of that, of course a lot of people didn't like, and they have fallen or been stagnant under Biden. That alone is a deadly peril to Biden's reelection, and which is why Democrats are scratching their heads saying, can we go all the way with this guy for the next year, hoping that there's, shall we say, another slip up somewhere on a podium that reveals the incumbent?
Yeah, look, as I keep saying, John, I don't think he's going to be on the ballot in November. It's just a question of how they wind up getting him off. John Fund, thank you so much, as always, for your insights.